Everybody, and welcome to this week's Will You Give Me a Reading? This week is not live because I have two very special guests, and I wanted to make sure I was available just for them so that you could get all the goodness that is coming up. So before I get into our special guests, all October, we've got some really great things going on. So we have our guests today on the 12th. On the 19th, you want to be here for Death Spiral, a reading about what happens to you at the moment of your death. You definitely want to come for this. And then on the 26th, we have the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, i.e. the Tarot Knights. Like, do you want to come looking for trouble? Maybe this is the day. The Halloween is upon us and we want to look in the dark side. So you are welcome to both of those, live or tuning in later. So for today, we've got some really great guests. I don't even know how to begin to introduce you guys. The fabulous and wondrous Cassandra Snow and Siri Vincent Plouff. Welcome so much to Will You Give Me a Reading? How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.
Awesome. And also, I'd like to congratulate you on the book that you guys wrote together. I want to make sure I'm saying it all right. Lessons from the Empress, a tarot workbook for self-care and creative growth.
Yes.
It was
Thank you.
Came out on October 1st, correct? So it's fairly new. Well, congratulations. I know it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And Siri, especially an extra congratulations to you because this is your first book, is it not?
Yeah, this is my first book and it was really fun to do it with Cassandra. I actually think that I lucked out significantly in having somebody who's been through the process before. So I kind of had a better idea of what to expect than if I had just done it alone. And Cassandra and I have also collaborated on a lot of things over the years, so it felt good.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to start off with that. Like, how does one co-write a book? What is that? What is the process for the two of you? And what did that look like?
So the boring answer, I think, for people sometimes is that originally we just kind of divvied up the car. Like we were like, you do these chapters, I'll do these chapters. And then in talking to Wiser, we smoothed out a lot of edges so that it still sounded really cohesive. And then, of course, once we got into it and we were comfortable collaborating in this way, we did sort of like put some interjections and other thoughts into each other's work. So it still became that. I don't know what Siri wants to talk about for that, but I will say one really fun thing we did in the editing process to kind of smooth it over is that their parents have this beautiful farm, very quiet, and we went and we read the entire book to each other. I read the parts that Siri mostly wrote. Siri read the parts that I mostly wrote. We read them out loud to each other. And so if anything was too messy or sounded like so conversational that if you're not in the room with me, you won't understand what I'm trying to say. And I am saying me because that is a mostly me issue. We smoothed that out. We also, contributed to each other in that time and also just got a good idea of what needed to be done for those next several editing steps through Wiser.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really the unique part that I always want to talk about is we did have that really cute experience.
We did.
I will also say that it was, did you mention that it was a workshop before?
No.
Okay.
I forgot.
Yeah, that's all right. We've had a lot of interviews. So before this became a book, right? Like we didn't necessarily start from scratch with this book. So we taught a class called Creating in Weird Times, WYRD. And that was building off of a class that I did in 2020, which was Self-Care in Weird Times that I did with a different friend and collaborator here in town. And we decided to go with creativity and tarot for that workshop. And as is usual with both of us, as we were writing the workbooks for this, we were basically writing book chapters. Like And we had divvied it up, whereas, like we would both teach different aspects of the workshop on different weeks. And we kind of divvied that up by the suits and the majors, right? So that meant that whoever was the primary person in charge of that week's class wrote the primary materials for the workbook. And those all just like kind of independently of one another became um basically book chapters. And by the time we were done with that, we had a 100-page, at least like 100 pages worth of material. And I approached Cassandra and basically said like, hey, like maybe we should pretty this up and put it on our websites. And Cassandra was like, I can do you one better. Let's expand this and pitch it to Wiser, because honestly, who wants to download a 100-page zine? Like, no, and then like read it on their computer. Like, no, like let's make it into a book. We'll have more space. We can talk about, more tarot basics. Because we geared the class at people who were both creative, curious, so people who were finding and discovering their creativity, as well as people who were tarot curious, so people who had never done tarot before. And so just having a little bit more space on how to flesh those things out if you are a beginner is really nice. And I feel like the audience for the book has really stayed consistent. Like, it feels like this is a really good book if you are, maybe returning to creativity after putting it aside for a really long time, or if you are a creative person who is interested in tarot and just doesn't know how it works, like you can pick up this book and get something out of it.
Yeah, as I was reading the book, I mean, I have so many notes here. It's like, oh, this was good. Oh, that was good. Oh, that was good. And I just want to briefly kind of mention your guys' background before we get into the nitty gritty, because I know Cassandra, you've done, querying the tarot with Beth, and then like querying your craft, and then Siri. I was like, God dang, this girl is all over the place. Does she sleep? Because like Northern Lights witch, like you've got all of these things that you're manifesting all at the same time. The both of you guys, with a lot of like history behind you both, that really lends to. I always feel like the mark of a well done book is one that's easy to read, and that's not as easy as it looks, where someone who knows nothing about tarot but is like, oh, I need some self-care, maybe working through some trauma, whatever. This is interesting. What's that? And then they pull it off and they're going to be able to follow along. That is not easy to do, especially when you have a lot of history of like, what is it to be the beginner again? And so as you're telling me about the classes that you were teaching, it really is obvious that you kind of stay close to the source of that and who your audience is throughout that. So I want to say bravo, that's really well done.
Thank you.
Truly. On top of, but also you guys both know your stuff, and that's really, really obvious too. So I did want to talk a little bit about that, well, you have a piece that both of you talk about how do we approach the Empress, and how do we like build a relationship with the archetype of the Empress from like a queer perspective or a non-gendered perspective. And I wanted to know if you guys wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think people were a little bit surprised at the approach to the book, and some of that was the excitement for us, like the element of surprise, and knowing that we had readers' trust on my end and listeners' trust on Siri's end with the Heathen's Journey podcast. And I think that has made such a big difference because we've seen that shake out in how people are responding to the book. And so there was that piece of a lot of my work with querying the tarot was really about how all of these cards are for all of us, but it really does not seem like that a lot of the time. When you read a standard tarot book, it can feel very, I don't know, not to be dramatic, but when you are a marginalized person and you're reading things written for a mainstream audience, it does feel like choking or suffocating. Like it just feels like it's rubbing against you. Like this is wrong. This is wrong. So after querying the tarot, I wanted to not only maintain that approach, even if I was talking about new subjects like art and creativity and self-care, and expand that. And so I thought it would be cool to go into a card that is really gendered, but traditionally, but that neither of us really do that with necessarily. Siri has had some really beautiful journeying with it that contrasts that a little bit, but for my end, in a good way, but to my end, I just wanted to say I want to show everyone how this creativity, these ideas of creation, these ideas of nurturance and empowerment and embodiment are so necessary for everyone who is marginalized. And to do that, you have to tear down some of the barriers when it comes to gender. Otherwise, we both have a large audience that would not have finished the book, that would not have like enjoyed what we were doing. And we wouldn't have liked it. I think I have always used the Empress as like a lamppost for my creative work, which does feel so ungendered to me. And so I really wanted that to shine and to show that how, for me, similar to how I wrote in Queering the tarot and witchcraft have really been a salve and a healing process for me. So has art and creativity. And I think of those things, art and creativity are the ones that held my hands the easiest through my own sort of coming out as non-binary, getting more comfortable with that language and with myself. And so the Empress was still guiding all of that work for me, and I wanted to show that kind of throughout the book.
That's such a wonderful answer. Thank you
Oh,
so
you're
much.
welcome.
Yeah,
Did you want to add anything real quick, Siri? Sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. I think that for me, like I had a really interesting experience with embodying the Empress throughout this book, in that I was kind of trying to look at it as like, okay, these are all quote unquote feminine aspects, but what are the non-gendered, but also what is a masculine way to be feminine and what is a feminine way to be masculine? Sort of throughout the book, to kind of like further queer that, like what even is gender, was kind of the point that I was at by the end of the book. I was just like, I don't know, I have really no clue. And it got to the point where I was like, people would like, I would see like a tweet or something where people were talking about women, and I was like, oh my god, women, like gender. So I think that it really kind of helped like make that a little borderless for me. I mean, I think about, one of the decks that we talk about quite a bit in the book, and that is thankfully is illustrates the book, is the Next World Tarot.
I love that. Yeah, love that
Yeah,
deck.
which is really queer and radical as hell. And I when I think of the Empress now, I love the Empress from that deck specifically. Like that is a very good vision of the Empress for me. But I also think of the Queen of Cups from that deck, which shows an older person dressed in, pink and like ruffles and all of this like really feminine kind of coated dress, but they have a huge beard and stuff like that. So like I kind of think about that image. That image comes to mind really strongly for me when I think of the Empress now. So yeah, it's been, as two queer people working on a book that sort of deals with this very traditionally feminine, often like very gendered in other interpretations senses. It's been really fruitful.
It has been, and I think, and this is just in conversation, like just continuing, but I think one of the things that really drew us to doing a book about self-care and creativity were the aspects of finding your voice, which is so necessary for all marginalized genders, especially trans people, non-binary people, as well as women. And so, or I should say, as well as cis women. And so following that thread, ungendered things really fast and really opened up to something that we hope for people is really expansive. And the word Siri used a lot in this process was generative, to create your own stuff. And I absolutely love that. It's not a word I used a lot until I worked on this project with Siri. And now I say it for like everything.
I really love what you both have said about this. And I feel like, the idea of the, the Empress as evidenced by, the RWS really comes out of a Victoriana way of looking
Mhm.
at gender, right? And so that is such a construct in of itself, in a way that limits people according to their physical bodies and not their hearts and their souls and their minds. So it's so important, because if we're really going to look at patriarchy, right? Like,
Mhm.
and like the damage it's done, like cis het men also have to be able to connect to their inner softness and their own inner nurturing, and there's no shame in that, right? So I think of that. I'm also, what I'm hearing as you guys are talking is, as a self-care kind of book, some people may get triggered of the Empress as the mother, right? Their mother. So how do I align with a mother that doesn't need to be like my mother? Like, how do I find the man in pink with a beard and a big bow? Like, and that's my way into the Empress. I think that's really, oh, I'm gonna get emotional. It's really precious. And it's
Oh,
such
thank you.
healing work, that we're all trying to just, I don't know, shuck off this crap.
Mhm.
you know so I appreciate that. And I love, as I was going through this, I don't like, obviously I don't know your guys' background in any trauma work, but I've been, for reasons, and I'm like, oh my god, this is trauma work, this is trauma work, this is trauma work, this is like body keeps score, this is like somatic experience, and this is art therapy. And you guys didn't say any of that. You didn't put like words that would, like otherize people. They're like, I don't get it. It was really in a way that was really inclusive and very simple, like to access. It was really some high level work for healing. And that is not easy to pull off. So that's what I mean. Like, this is really a very unique book in that way. And I want to
Thank
call attention
you.
to it because I don't know if anyone else will. So I'm going to. I know I see what's been happening under the hood here. And I appreciate all of it. So
Well,
thank you.
thank you. I know that a lot of why we didn't put those words on it was, I know for me, I don't necessarily feel qualified to say that or come from that space, but I have been deep in healing and trauma work. And I think self care is so necessary. I'm, even now that the book is out, still always learning. But I also think there needs to be such a real difference between real self care, which is a lot of those modalities that you were talking about. And it is something that, like, the longer I'm in therapy, the more I think that everyone should be in good therapy because the tools that help will help even if you don't have a deeper issue. We all still have a bad day. And so, I think we did kind of bring that in, that idea that these, we just keep coming back to, these things are for everyone, and we are most interested in speaking to the people who have the least access about them, or maybe the least knowledge about them. And then I think something that is so healing, and to use a word I rarely use because I'm not qualified, therapeutic, is love of all types. And for me, my most significant relationships have come out of either tarot community or art community. And I mean like solid friendships too, And so I think that the love I have for those things carries through to those people and vice versa. And so for us, it was also like, I don't know, we love everyone that's going to read it most likely. And so we wanted them to feel like they were just getting a big hug from us that would then inspire them to make a bunch of art.
Yay for art. Yay for art. Totally. So it's so healing. Like, I've been doing a lot of just research in like neurology and brain science as a tarot reader, like what is going on, what's going on with your sides, and how art gets us to places that are pre-verbal, pre-linguistic, and gets us some really old stuff that needs to like show up and be expressed and then like processed. So I'm
Yeah.
just like all over what you guys are doing. And the fact, like, let me just a few that I really liked. I wrote down a few.
Real
Like,
quick, while you look for them, I was interested in what Siri was going to add, just because I usually love what they add.
oh, sorry,
So
I didn't see you.
you're totally
Just go ahead and get in there.
I am such a Nordic Minnesotan and I never interrupt people. So, thank you, Cassandra, for calling out the fact that I can't interrupt people and helping
I'm
me.
also the oldest of four, so I'm like, no, it's this person's turn now.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that first of all, you know, that like unspoken stuff that we all have to process. I think tarot is such a good tool for using that because it is artistic, and I think that that is how we connect to art. And it doesn't matter like if you're using a super serious tarot deck or if you're using like the manga tarot or something, you know, like it
Mhm.
really doesn't matter. What matters is your personal connection to it. I also have a confession to make.
Go on.
So Cassandra said that as you know, like a person with a marginalized identity, like reading a tarot book, you might, you know, feel really choked, or you know, like you might feel that really intensely. I actually have a way of like compartmentalizing things so that a lot of those super traditional meanings, I'm just like, fuck it, I'm not going to deal with that. But sorry, I swore. Do you want me to re-say that so you can?
Nah, no, it's fine.
Okay. I swear like a sailor, and it's amazing that more episodes of the podcast aren't rated explicit. Anyway, so yeah, so normally when I'm reading, I'm just like, fuck it, I don't care about this. It wasn't until we were having conversations with other people about the book, like, and like I'm remembering specifically a conversation with a queer person who was like, "Oh yeah, like I normally, like I trust you both really intensely, so I'm definitely going to read this book, but I hate working with the Empress because of the whole motherhood thing." And I was like, "Wait a minute, people read the Empress as a mother?"
Yeah.
And like it just had never, like I'd always breezed past it in all of the interpretation books, and in most of the decks that I work with really closely, like that is not a huge part of the artwork or the you know, all of that with the Empress. So we have thoroughly queered it to the point
We
where I got how normies read the card.
Well, and like, and similarly, so I did have a lot of clients when I first started out who had those same struggles, even though I too was like, well, I just won't read it that way when I first read about them. And that was largely not because I didn't like it, because I'm also against like spiritually bypassing yourself with the cards. But in when I was starting to read professionally in the 2010s, it just didn't feel, and it might have been even earlier than that, I don't quite remember, but it just didn't feel like the most helpful or necessary message to be giving people a lot of the time. So, and when I was writing about the tarot, I did so much of the work of breaking a lot of this stuff down and queering the tarot. And to me, all of, and I think this is true of most writers, and certainly Jenna, you can speak to this as well. Most of our work as writers is like continuation on other work that we have done. And so so it was still jarring to have like done all of that, and then people, but that's not always the case for the reader. They haven't all grown up with you, they haven't all been there since the beginning, which is good because you want to be gaining audience as you go.
Yeah.
But it was still surprising when people said that to me, because I felt very like, but I've been talking about this forever, but like that's fine that they don't know. Like it just
Like, where have you been? I have uncovered this forever. No, I get it. There's like this constant like renewal process, and you have to kind of bring your past with you and go, oh, but this was also going on, and this is also going on. Especially as it feels our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter and shorter in time. So wanted to ask the both of you. So sorry. Definitely let me know. I want to make sure to hear both of your voices. I'm just not used to interviewing two people at one time. This is like new for me.
Totally
So
okay. You're
I'm like
okay.
blush, blush. So I really wanted to talk about just going through all of the cool activities as also a writer. And my book is coming out soon. Will you give me a reading in next month? And how the whole time it just felt like I had this like inner critic just like sitting there, and like the shape of resistance would shift over time, and it was like this constant like beating back effect. And I was just like, oh my god, I could have totally have used this spread. I will definitely use this as a writer, as a resource for a lot of those moments. um yeah, so I want to talk about a spread for managing pain in the creative process. I was like, oh crap, I would have wished I'd had that, and I will use this very soon, most likely. So when you talk about spiritual bypassing and not wanting to be that, I see that as also a good like evidential piece of work, that you guys aren't running away from hard pain. Like, we want to look at it and hold it and care for it. And that was really clear too in what you guys were doing.
Yeah. So that's a section that I actually wrote. And I there's so many different ways that you can take the stories of the suits, right? Like, I think that with swords especially, there's like technology, there's communication, there's messengers, and then there's also this big overarching theme of trauma and pain. And I remember very specifically, I don't think I use the word trauma too often in there, and if I do, I try to pair it with pain,
Mhm.
because I don't want to assume that everybody has trauma or deals with like capital T trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
um and I'm also not a licensed therapist, so
Yeah.
there's all of that too. um but I was thinking about that specifically, and how people have the stereotype of the starving artist or the struggling artist who is creating from this place of intense pain and intense emotion. um and I kind of wanted there to be a chapter that was like, well, yes, of course, like this is real, like this is something that people deal with, and creativity will not always feel expansive, wonderful. You may feel imposter syndrome, you may feel like everything that you create is shit for a while. It's like, that was really important to me. And so then managing pain throughout the creative process too, like, I think it can also be pretty unhealthy to only deal with your process.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to have other outlets, and you need to have also other things that are influencing your creative process. And I actually was looking for my book and I couldn't find it, because I was like, oh, what did I say in that spread? But yes, I'm glad that it's useful.
Mhm.
Oh my God, entirely useful, and really useful for everybody, people. And that's a thing too that I like that you guys did, was even though it was very like, if you've never used tarot, you can access the book immediately, really. But it wasn't like this like, not like 101 is tedious, but how someone who maybe, oh, I know my tarot, and oh, here we go. It didn't feel like that. It was like, oh, what is their take? Like, I'm going to learn something from this. Oh, that's a new way. So that's a really hard balance to strike. And you have to be, I really like know your craft to do that well, as you're thinking about all these audiences who are showing up. So I have a question for you guys, as the both of you were going through creating this book. How did you have self-care for yourself in this process, or besides just having a friend whose family's got this awesome farm somewhere that you can go chill at? But like what did you really embody for yourself as you were going through this process?
I was actually gardening a lot through this process, which felt very Empressy.
Yeah.
And I it's a like until like a point of almost an obsessive level. Like, I was in Siri, I was can confirm. I was like texting the triplex like daily notes on what my plants were doing out back and like over the summer. And like, but to me, it also just felt so good to get out there and like have my hands in dirt. And it, like, I've been an artist pretty much my whole life. I majored in theater up until the pandemic. I ran a theater company. I still am doing creative projects outside of this world. And so, but this really, it felt like creation in a whole new way, in a way that did feel very self-care oriented. So that was a really cool piece of it for me. And then when Jenna and I were just chatting right before this, I was like, people ask how I get so much done. And the really boring answer is that I'm precious about my 8 to 10 hours of sleep a night. And I'm precious about meal times being like phones off, computers off multiple times a day. And I stay hydrated. And I will say for me, for self-care, that gets me through the baseline of a project. Those three things, like rest, water, and eating, and like having off time with your screens, is not the only thing you can do long term. But when I'm doing a book, I know that there's an end date on when that is and when I can incorporate other stuff again. And then I think, publishing's weird. It's hurry up and wait, hurry up and wait. And so I know both of us in the waiting process tried to just not do a lot of other stuff, with like the huge exception of Siri planning a wedding.
Yeah, and not even. I tried to do as little as possible.
Right.
For me, so I in the book we talk a little bit about like who is your court, like what court card is showing up for you at this time, like which is the page, the knight, and the queen and the king that feel most resonant for you. And at the time of writing this book, I actually went from a very firm, like always feeling like the Queen of Pentacles, like always concerned about generosity and giving of myself and reallocating resources and all of that kind of thing, into a very Queen of Swords, where I kind of remembered some of the lessons that I got from grad school, which my grad school experience was a lot. I was going to school full time, even like over the like minimum number of classes you were supposed to take in a semester. I graduated an entire semester early, if that tells you anything. And I was also working 20 to 40 hours a week, and I was also starting my tarot business at the time. But the thing that I learned from that period of my life, which was burnout centric and horrible, was sometimes it just has to be done. Sometimes you just have to put it down and be done. And so my like very Queen of Swords self-care, protecting my time, protecting myself has been, okay, like it's not going to be perfect. Sometimes it's okay to just be done with this. And that made room for other things in my life during the process of both writing the book and like, the last year. I went through a pretty intense burnout this spring into summer, and have been, even more precious, I would say, with my time after that. And so that has been, saying no, I would say, has been my primary mode of self-care this year.
Which, that Queen of Swords showing up is going to help you do that, versus Queen of Pentacles, who's like, who needs another plate? Everyone? Anyone hungry? Got some dessert coming, and you're just like,
Yeah.
It's funny though, like one fun fact you guys may know, but I love sharing this like little fun fact about Queen of Swords. So one of the things I did is I took all 16 court cards and I picked every adjective from like at least 10 to 15 different sources. spanning over 100 years. And then I made a word cloud with it. So you could
Oh,
see
fun.
what words were more consistent and what is like falling away. And there was actually one of the really consistent words or like series of words for Queen of Swords is loves to dance.
Oh, fun.
That
I
is
actually
one of
did not know that. That is cool though.
It is one of
Yeah.
it was consistent pretty much through the early aughts, and then it started to shift. And I was like, that's so badass, you know,
Yeah.
like who like it's like, oh, she's severe, she's a widow, she's blah blah blah. Oh, but she also loves to dance. And I'm like, there's a whole other story to Queen of Swords that
Yes.
that I want to know before this goes away.
Yes, the Queen of Swords will say no to that like 7 p.m. meeting after a long day of work so that she can go dancing on a Thursday.
And she's funny. Like I often see
Yeah.
she's often really seen in a severe way. And I'm like, no, she's known for being, she's gonna be the quickest on her feet with her words, like,
Well, the banter, yeah.
yeah. So I love the Queen of Swords, like,
Yeah.
and I'm glad that you brought her forth. So I feel like we should probably start wrapping this up soon. I mean, I could sit with you guys for so much more time and talk about all of this stuff. Like, I really love the ritual structure. I really like the 6 hats spread. I was like, you know, as someone who has ADHD and is not neurotypical, that is like, oh my God, look at that. There's categories. You know, like I get very excited. Buckets. I can put things in buckets and then I can figure it out. So I really like that. I want to play with that. Um, and I really like, I don't know which one of you wrote this, but like the 3 minors as echoes of the Empress, or the 3s in the minors are echoes of the Empress. I've never thought about it that way, to be honest with you. So
So, because this is me and my Queen of Pentacles energy, I'm actually going to plug a mutual friend of Siri and I's book that is coming out in 2023 if people like that work. And that 3 a.m. Tarot online has a book coming out called Finding the Fool, and it breaks the tarot down. So it steeps you in what we know of like tarot theory and things like that, as well as these like beautiful, expressive pieces of being like in the card. But it also breaks down the astrology and numerology in a way that ties like those 3. And I actually think Meg, along with my friend Rebecca Skolnick, who has a book about numerology that's out now, called The Witch's Book of Numbers, I think. And I think even just being friendly or friends with those 2 people like opened up a lot of that for both of us, I think. And we were like, oh, cool. And I just like new ways to think about stuff. So I'm glad that other people are also finding that useful.
yeah, I was like, oh, I was like, what have I never thought of that before? I was like, that is really great. I was like, I have to say something. Well, I want to know, what are the both of you doing, moving forward? Anything you want to tell people about while we've got their ear, or any way that they can reach you, or stuff for them to be looking out for the both of you? Whoever wants to start.
I can jump in. So I am actually, why are words leaving my brain? I have been commissioned to write a couple of the chapters of the re-release of the Fat Folks Tarot, which is
Yes,
going
I
to
know.
be in
That's
the
so exciting.
spring. So I am so excited about that. I was so honored that they asked me, and it's a deck I've been a huge champion of pretty much since I heard it existed. And so I was so excited to be pulled on board for that. That you'll know more in 2023 because they're going to relaunch the Kickstarter, and then it'll be out in the spring. And so I'm so psyched about that. Some other book stuff that is not sort of giggy or writer for hire is honestly a little under wraps. I just signed with an agent. I'm excited to see what her and I do together. So that's really fun. But I will say people should follow me to be in the know about all of that. On Instagram, I'm at mix.cassandra.snow. And then you can support my work on Patreon, and where I am very prolific. And it's patreon.com/Cassandra Snow. I am open for readings. It's sparse, but it exists. And so that's Cassandra-snow.com. You can find that on there.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I am currently in the second season of the Heathen's Journey podcast, which is very different. I think that probably most of my audience were surprised that my first book was a tarot book rather than a rune book, honestly. So I'm just like bringing them in to tarot. So this season we're focusing on the underworld. I have some really exciting things, updating mostly on Wednesdays. I took a little mid-season break for the week of wedding. I was just like,
Good.
it's basically the middle of the season, so I'm gonna take some time off. So that's really wonderful. You can just find it anywhere you get your podcasts at Heathen's Journey Podcast. I'm also on Patreon at Heathen's Journey Pod, so patreon.com/Heathen's Journey Pod. That space may or may not be shifting. I'm not totally certain. I have an idea for a ghost newsletter.
Ooh.
Not a newsletter about ghosts, but a newsletter on the ghost platform. Although I'll probably talk a lot about spirits anyway. So yeah, it's just a ghost newsletter. But we'll see when that happens. I'm allowing myself to get through the end of the year before I make a decision about that. I am also working on book 2. It is pretty deeply under wraps at the moment, although it is more so, I would say, related to my content at the Heathen's Journey. Instagram, you can catch up with everything on Instagram at siri.vincent.plouff. And I'm on Twitter as well at northlightwitch. TikTok at Heathen's Journey Pod. I cannot tell you that will be consistent or professional at all. But
Yeah.
if you're into the chaos, I'm into the chaos. So
I also have a TikTok that is Tarot Cassandra, and it's funny that is the one that is not my name. That is like my old professional name, because no, it is me telling rambunctious stories about our neighborhood squirrels and complaining and nothing on, but you're welcome to follow me there.
Yeah, I'll put some of your links, especially your Instagram links and your website, in the description once this goes up on YouTube, so people can easily find you guys and the patrons as well. Thank you so much for your guys' time. I know that you must be so busy with, you're still early days of the book release, and people, there's all this buzz now, I'm sure. So thank you for spending some time with me, and thank you for this book. It is such a beautiful addition to both the industry and to anyone who's just looking to take care of themselves a little better from a creative process. So thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us and for being flexible with recording.
Totally. And yes.
So much.
Oh, thank you. And for those of you that are tuning in, thank you for coming in, and you will find information about them below in the description. And have a wonderful week. Next week, death spiral. What will happen at the moment of your death? You definitely, if you dare, want to come and take this journey with me. So have a wonderful rest of your week all. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.